and Ole Miss beating Kentucky 98-84.
Wasn't that close.
It wasn't that close. They wanted that 100 so bad. They wanted it bad, couldn't get it. But Ole Miss from the jump. Let's do the box score thing first, like we usually do. Matt Morrell had the best game of the season for Ole Miss. He had 24 points, his best game of the season.
Yeah.
He had 24 points on 8 of 13 shooting, 6 of 11 from 3. Earlier in the season, he was doing a lot of ball faking, and last night the confidence, the catch and shoot confidence that he had was great, and shooting in rhythm and making outside shots like he can. He also dunked the ball, which you're probably rolling your eyes at that if you're not familiar with his injury situation. He looked like he had a little bit more bounce than he's had in quite some time.
I just stared at the screen for a second. You linked the Auburn box score.
Oh, did I? Oh, shoot.
Like, what am I looking at?
Oh, I'm sorry. That's my bad.
Yeah. I got it now. I got it up now.
That's my bad.
Yeah, we're good.
But yeah, he dunked last night. He played good defense again. I wonder if they're able to like manage things like inflammation and stuff. He's not practicing anymore. It just physically he can't do it. And by the way, Karl Ravitch on a basketball broadcast, I enjoyed him.
No, he's not bad.
I thought he was good. Yeah. But a good night for Matt Morrell getting 24 points. He is, how your old high school coach used to say, there's playing hurt and then there's hurt and injured.
Yeah.
He's injured. He's not hurt. He's injured, and he's playing through it and had an excellent night last night. Dre Davis, also really good for Ole Miss. He had 17 points on 7 of 10 from the field. Only 2 of his 10 were from 3. He was able to get to the basket. This little mid-range turnaround that he's shooting lately it's just impossible to defend at his height. He had a really good night as well. 16 from Malik Dia. You had 15 from Jalen Murray. He was especially big when Kentucky was kind of making it weird in the second half. He had some clutch buckets and also 10 assists, did Murray in the game. Brakefield had 10. Sean Padula had 8. And so let's start there. First of all, Ole Miss 24 assists, 1 turnover.
You'll win every game you play. You will win every game you play when your assist-to-turnover ratio is 24 to 1.
24 to 1.
I'll guarantee it.
It's been a quarter century at least since somebody has had that.
When you look at the box
SEC
score, when you really look at the box score, at first glance you would think Kentucky should have won this game, right? They shot 50%, 48% from 3. They were good on the free throw line. They out-rebounded Ole Miss. They were 21-8 assist to turnover. They played really well. They had 5 guys in double figures. But 24 to 1, you can't beat that.
Yeah.
If you don't, extra possessions, points off of turnovers, if you don't allow any, you can't. It's almost impossible to lose as long as you're making shots. And Ole Miss was making shots at a really good pace. They shoot 55% and 43% from behind the arc. Morrell, as you mentioned, 6 for 11, really big game for him. All 4 of the 5 starters in double figures, and then Brakefield gives you 10 off the bench. Just as close to. I have to imagine that Chris Beard, who's not a poor mouther, but at the same time, he's not too effusive with his praise. He probably had to stifle himself coming into the press conference after only turning the ball over 1 time.
Yeah, he said he wanted the perfect game, and they didn't get it. The turnover came in the second half.
Yeah.
He also said that the first half was the most fun he's ever watched a team that he coaches play.
They destroyed them.
Absolutely destroyed them.
They were up, 20?
23 at the half.
Yeah,
they got it up to 27 at one point. And the thing is, there's so much to kind of take away from this because it's, in a sense, a historic win because Ole Miss doesn't beat Kentucky very often. Like, they just don't beat Kentucky.
Gosh, I didn't realize Williams had a triple-double.
Yeah, he was excellent.
And a loss.
Player. And a loss.
Goodness gracious.
But if I'd have told you that Sean Padula is giving you 8 points and Kentucky's going to make literally half their shots and 48% from 3, you'd have said, oh, how bad did they get beat?
Yeah. Yeah, again, if you just told me the Kentucky stats, I would think they won this game easily.
Yeah. And they're a good offensive basketball
team. But Ole
team.
Miss's stat, I can't get over 24 to 1. I just can't get over it. That is a ridiculous statistic.
It's hard to fathom.
You think about it, like just a ball goes off your hands or a deflection or something, and it goes deflected and then deflected back onto you.
Or just like a miscommunication.
Yeah.
Where
you had none of that.
None of it.
That is a Ole Miss may not play a better game this year.
There's no, I mean, part of it is aided by Kentucky being a very poor defensive basketball team, but I think that just chalking it up to that is not really fair either, because that's 3 games in a row now where Ole Miss has done really nice, good things offensively. They were in the 80s against Auburn on Saturday. It's the best team in America. Mm-hmm. So I think what you're seeing is the fruits of some adjustments that they've made offensively. Guards are attacking the basket more. They didn't live and die from the three-point shot last night. It's not like they just jacked up a bunch of threes and they just made them all. I mean, I mentioned Dre Davis attacking the basket. Those little mid-ranges at his height and length are almost impossible to defend. Padula didn't have a good night last night, but against Auburn, he was attacking the basket. They're getting to the free throw line more. I know Kentucky's a bad defensive team, but Ole Miss has steadily improved on that side of the ball, and you're seeing the results of that.
Massive.
They're both road games, but you've got LSU and South Carolina coming up. You still have Oklahoma at home. You have Mississippi State at home, Vanderbilt, and I know they have a couple of nice wins there in Nashville, but that is certainly a winnable game.
Very winnable.
Tennessee at home. I mean, Tennessee has struggled on the road. You're talking about, you're very close to talking about just seeding at this point for Ole Miss after a win last night.
If they win these next 2, it's just seeding. Yeah, and they should be on a 3-game winning streak when Mississippi State comes to Oxford next Saturday. And if that's the case, like you said, we talked a lot early in the season about how the brutal finish to the Ole Miss schedule, right? 3 of their last 4, they're at Auburn, they're at Florida, and they have Tennessee at home. I think that's correct. And am I right? I am right. So you were like, gosh, that's, they got to be in good shape by the time they get to that point. Well, they're going to be. Mm-hmm. They're going to be. I mean, they got 6. They should be at 8 by this time next week, right? When they played LSU.
They'll be favored to have 8.
They should
by this
be at
time
8
next week.
I definitely think they'll beat Oklahoma at home. And then
they've proven. I mean, they went to Tuscaloosa and won. So this is a team that's proven that they can play with the best.
I'll just tell you, I don't think they'll win at Auburn. I don't think they'll win at Florida. But if they win one, if I'm giving them South Carolina and LSU and Oklahoma, right? That's 9. If they just win one from State at Vanderbilt, Tennessee, that's 10 and 8. You're probably a 5 seed at worst.
4, maybe.
Maybe even a 4, yeah.
So they're in really good shape. We talked about it yesterday going into the game. I think the first 4 minutes from Malik Dia were like tone setting. I mean, he came out focused. I mean, he had an early block, a difficult rebound, and had a couple of easy baskets to start the game and kind of set the tone. And then Ole Miss built confidence. It happens sometimes in basketball, but Kentucky. Hey, Dad. How many times could you ever say that you watched a Kentucky basketball team go to Ole Miss and be completely shook? They were shook in the first half. At one point,
I told you the home crowd was going to play a role in that too.
And Dykes, the color analyst on the broadcast, at one point in the first half said, "Kentucky's not running offense; they're running for their lives."
It's funny that we talked about yesterday that Ole Miss needs to make Kentucky play their game. No. Ole Miss decided to play Kentucky's game and beat them at it. And that's, again, I thought Ole Miss did that with State a little bit. I thought that they didn't get the win, but they played a little bit more of what State wants to do and were right there with them. They went to Alabama and forced Alabama to play their game and beat them. And now they play Kentucky and they're like, no, we'll run with you. And they put 98 up on the board and win by 14. This team's dangerous. This team is dangerous right now. Look. One turnover aside, that's not ever going to happen again. But
they're in the top 15 in the country in
they value
turnover margin, though.
They value the basketball, and that's a huge piece. This team's dangerous right now. You don't want to be playing Ole Miss right this second.
Yeah,
and like I said, they're going to get these next 2 wins, and then at that point, you're what? You're 6 and you're already 6 and
8 and 4.
They'd be 8 and 4. You don't. With a ton of momentum playing Mississippi State, and who knows? I don't know what State's going to do in these next 2 games before they play Ole Miss. If State wins them both, then we got a great matchup.
Yeah.
But State could very easily lose them both and be looking at a bad situation where they go up to Ole Miss and get run off the floor. So we'll see.
There was a couple moments in the game last night which were like the complete flip of the Auburn game Saturday. So in the second half, Ole Miss would cut it to 4, into 5, and like they would get the big shot, and the crowd would be into it. There'd be a timeout, and then Auburn would come out of that and just make a bucket and make a play, and just would never let Ole Miss make that one shot or that one play that would flip the game on its head. Kentucky was trying to claw their way back in. They cut it to 11 at one point in the second half, and then Ole Miss gets 3-point shot, stop, get to the foul line, 2 made free throws, and that kind of ended the game. So anytime Kentucky was really trying to push and have that moment where, hey, if they get a stop here, or hey, if they make this shot, the game flips, Ole Miss didn't allow them to do that. So even through the start of the second half where they just had a defensive lull, I mean, they're human beings, right? They were kicking their behind in the first half. You could kind of tell that they lost focus in the first 4 minutes of the second half, and you could see the coaches during a couple of timeouts early in the second half, they're like, all right, guys, wake up again because the game's not over. They can shoot themselves back in. Let's go a little bit. And then they locked back in and ended up winning the game. But I found that interesting that Auburn did that to them, and they turned around and did the same thing to Kentucky. Mm-hmm. Anytime they would kind of claw back in, they would just kind of push them back down. Just, you're not doing this. You're not winning tonight. And they would make those necessary plays. To the text line we go. Chris says, the best overall half of Ole Miss basketball I've ever seen, and I went to my first game in 1977.
I mean, I've watched Ole Miss play basketball for years, and yeah, that you got a very strong case.
Mike says it's all pain management for Morrell. He will have knee surgery when the season is over. Also, I guess, he hurt his back, too, in the BYU game. Back, obviously in non-conference play. Dude's just banged up right now. But I don't know what they're doing. Maybe they found what we'll call it a shot that worked, or that.
So the other day when Hubbard got hurt, he talked about taking antibiotics, really strong antibiotics, and I was just like, that's not what you mean. You meant anti-inflammatories, I'm pretty sure.
Anti-inflammatories.
It's like he's down there getting a shot of penicillin to get him back in the game. So, yeah, they gave him a little NyQuil, and he's good to go. Put him back in.
But something's working. And I don't know if I don't know if he can play like that every night, considering the injury is just not going to go away. But, man, if he's confidently shooting 3-point shots like that and then feeling comfortable enough to aggressively attack the basket. Oof.
Yeah, it'll be fine.
Jake says Ole Miss played crazy tight defense in the first half. Yeah, absolutely, they set the tone because that's a really good Kentucky offense. Every guy can score. They can all shoot.
But you put up 50. Yeah, defensively they played really good, but they put up 54 points in the first half.
Yeah,
I mean, you should be leading when you do that.
Yeah, Jeff echoes the sentiment. The first half of the game last night was the best I've seen an Ole Miss basketball team play ever. Another one, they finally played to their own pace and never really allowed Kentucky to get into a rhythm. That's where Murray in the second half was big. Not only did he make a few shots and also had 10 assists with no turnovers, but he's played a ton of basketball in his life. Like, he's a veteran guy. And Saturday against Auburn, he stunk it up. He basically just did cardio. But in those moments where Kentucky would make a couple shots, it's like he would call for the basketball and just say, no, give it to me, and like hold it and just and let everybody take a breath and just like, all right, guys, calm down. And he would like slowly dribble the ball up the floor and just kind of like let the game breathe again. And he did that a few games earlier this season as well. And in Tuscaloosa against Alabama, he was really good at forcing the pace again, where Alabama would make a couple shots and then he would force whoever was inbounding to give him the ball and just sit on it for a second and just say, hey, hold on, let's relax. And that was where he was at his best, I think, last night, was not just making the shots or the passes. It was reminding, or not reminding, but controlling the pace of the game. When Kentucky would get on runs, he would slow everything down. They would run their offense. And then, of course, he made shots and passes after that.
Having a player like that is so valuable. A veteran point guard who can just understand the flow of the game, understand when you need to speed up, understand when you need to slow down, control things. It's invaluable. And 15-10, I mean, the stat line shows it off.
Yeah. Somebody says payback from the Kentucky football lose. Hog and Oxford. I hate to put it this way, but to recover from a football loss that kept you out of the playoff, you need to beat them in basketball like a dozen more times.
that game would have had a lot more meaning. That needed to be an NCAA tournament game to match up.
Did Kentucky beat Arkansas and Lexington Saturday? No, and that's the other side of this, right? Hey, Dad, is good win for Ole Miss. They scored 98, feeling good, confidence. What is up with Kentucky?
They're not going the right direction. We'll just say that for
They
sure.
beat Duke. They beat Duke.
Yeah.
Imagine if those two played again.
Looking at Kentucky, too, I mean, how many in a row have they lost now? It's 2 in a row.
So that's 4 of 5.
They bounce back a little bit. They get South Carolina at home, right? But then they got to play Tennessee. Not easy.
Also at home, but still.
And of their last 4 games, at Alabama and Auburn comes to Rupp. They do get Oklahoma and LSU in there. Oh, I'm sorry, that's 5. And then they finish the year at Missouri. So 3 of their last 5 are against top 15 teams. Not in great shape.
No,
Mark Pope. We talked about DeBoer, in football. Same thing. There's a standard. You got to meet it. If you don't, you go on the hot seat. It doesn't matter how long you've been there. So you finish middle of the pack in the SEC, and then you go to the NCAA tournament, and you're one and done there. Buddy, you're not going to be long for that job.
You shouldn't read too much into post-game press conferences, but his last night is fascinating.
Oh, yeah? I didn't see it.
He looks like a guy that has no idea what to do. He's just
He's overwhelmed.
Just
his teams, if they can't get into the 90s, they can't win for the most part.
Yeah.
When you look at their this year, their losses, they don't have a lot of games where they've won where they've been under 90.